All right, here we go. Share my screen.
Do you think we can send this recording to me after, Jack? I can email it to my list, and then I can put your contact information in my list.
We certainly can.
Yeah,
absolutely. It is 2 p.m. Mountain Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Welcome everyone who's joining. We're going to start here in actually 2 minutes, but in the meantime, for those who are just joining, could you do us a favor? Could you put the number 4 in the chat if you can hear us, see us, and also this is going to test to make sure the chat works. Put the number 4 in the chat. Excellent. I mean, you can see us and you can hear us. It's good you can hear us. It's my first time using my new microphone.
It's crystal clear.
Let's go. We're going to get going here in 2 minutes, 2 minutes past the hour. So grab whatever you need, settle down. If you've actually got your high schooler with you, bonus points. And if not, you can send them some insight back.
Sounds good.
All right, it is 2 minutes past the hour, so we are going to get going here. 2:02 Mountain Time, 4:02 Eastern Time, where Larry is. And as you can see my screen, I'm honored once again to have the legendary, the famous Larry Cheung giving up his valuable time today to be on this webinar with me. Larry, thanks for joining.
Pleasure is mine, Jack. Always good to be here.
So for those who are new, and this is your first webinar of mine, I don't know, I feel like Larry and I get together every few months or so. Larry is a specialist in the standardized test prep realm of college planning. And as most of you all know, if you came from my email list, I'm a more general, holistic college coach. So our insights typically help us to collaborate and give the best possible college planning and standardized test insight to you, the parent of a high schooler. And again, like I was saying just before we started, if you've got your high schooler on this call, bonus points to you. We're going to go over a few items today in particular that we want to discuss at the beginning that I think are going to be really beneficial if you have your high schooler on. If not, don't worry, we are recording this. So as long as technology does work, we will have a recording of this as well that we'll send out likely early next week, both to Larry's list and mine. So to get going here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see you on a bigger screen here, Larry. And why don't we start out with this? I do have just a couple questions I want to ask at the start, but first I want to lay out the format here. We're going to have this webinar go for just about 45 minutes. We'll start out. I have a couple questions I want to ask you, Larry. You can ask any questions of me. And then what we're going to do is we're going to open it up to the chat box. We're going to have anyone ask questions live and we will answer them live. If it's more SAT prep pertaining, Larry, you'll take over. If it's more college planning, holistic, I'll take over. And if you stump us and we don't know the answer, which I think is rare, we'll get back to you. We'll get your email and we'll shoot you an email after this. So why don't we start with this before we dive in? Because I do have a couple questions I want to ask you, Larry. Why don't you just, for everyone, give a little bit about your background and how you kind of got started in this area?
Sure, definitely. So, hi everyone, my name is Larry, and I'm the owner of a coaching program called Tigerway. And here in Boston, we focus on helping students really improve their academic foundation in math and English. So what we have found over time as a team is that we've studied what are the core academic skills that are important to take away from high school that will carry through to help people find success in college and beyond. And we found that those skills, obviously history and science are very important, but the two life skills that are integrated with academics also happen to be math and English. And those are the two skills that are coincidentally very focused on for standardized testing. So what we do in my program is we focus on helping people become experts at reading comprehension, experts at solving difficult math problems, not so much from just a test-taking standpoint, but helping people to really figure out how to think and problem solve. And so over the last several years, we've helped a lot of people not only raise their SAT scores, but help them develop a foundation to give them that pathway to be successful in college and compete better in the job market across different majors and different industries. And so that's what we do here at Tigerway. And I met Jack a couple of years ago when we joined an online educational community. And I learned that Jack was a college coach, college planning expert. And that's when we started to really collaborate to share our expertise across our networks. And it's been such a pleasure to work with Jack and help his audience discover what we can do for him and help his insights be shared to my audience as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Larry, for that intro. Also, just so you both know, we are both from the Boston area. Larry lives there. I'm out in Denver. It's mostly because I like to snowboard. But we both have roots back on the East Coast. Before you get in here, I'm actually going to put a link in the chat. Anyone who's in here, you can click it. You can open it up. These are my preferred partners. You can see there's someone at the very top, and that is Larry and Tigerway. Just so you all know, anyone who is interested in kind of supplementary college planning resources, which we will get into what that means here, probably in some of your questions. These are my pre-vetted preferred partners. I've individually met with anyone who's on this list and can certainly attest to their knowledge and systems and coaching approach. So as you can see here, there's someone who's at the very top, and you've got them today in Larry. So I just wanted to provide that before I forget. Make sure you click the link before we end this webinar because it will go away. All right, fantastic. So let's get going here. Larry, I've got a particular question for you, given that I see this question a lot during this particular time frame. The holidays are coming. This means if you have a high school senior, they're probably wrapping up their standardized testing. Maybe it's already completely wrapped up, but you do have those students who are kind of trying to squeeze in that very last SAT or ACT to get them into colleges before January. You then have juniors who see these seniors going through the entire application and decision time frame right now, who say, oh, this standardized testing, what's going on? What's the timeline with this? You then have sophomores who might be on the earlier side, but honestly are also looking at standardized testing. And then you, of course, have freshmen. I get asked from all four categories, basically, the typical timeline, or when should students start thinking about standardized testing? Question one to you. I've got to bring this up. I bring this up all the time now, but the world has changed in the last 3 years. So question one is, does standardized testing still matter, Larry? And then question two is, if it does, talk to me about a typical time frame you would like to see as someone who specializes in standardized test prep, when they should start with you, or honestly just prep in general for standardized testing.
Okay, that's a great question. So I'm going to answer question number one in this way. So in the US, there are hundreds of fantastic universities and colleges. Great opportunities present themselves at all of these schools. And back in 2020, just a little bit of history, the pandemic made the college admissions system change such that they gave students more flexibility when it came to testing and showing their skills in different ways. What I have found over the last 12 months is that the more competitive the school in terms of the ranking that you might see on US News, World and Reports, the more competitive the school, the more each data point will factor in to the ultimate reject or accept decision. So based on what we've seen, the statistics that we look at on a yearly basis, the top 50 schools in the US tend to be very focused on having students who have really strong academic rigor, good standardized testing scores, a great college essay, and a general profile that demonstrates confidence and leadership. And that leadership can be exhibited through athletics, it can be exhibited through music, it can be exhibited through the community work that that student has participated in. But generally speaking, I would say the principle is in the top 50 schools, you don't want to leave anything off the table. So at these schools, of course, community service is optional, right? Joining clubs, gaining leadership experience, that's also optional. And at some of these schools, the written policy is that the test is optional. But the more of these data points that you omit from your profile, the less competitive that applicant becomes. And so as a rule that I think parents would find really helpful is if the school relies on a lot of, let's say, alumni donations to keep their ranking strong, the way the cycle is going to work is that school needs to accept what they perceive to be applicants who 5-10 years after they graduate and they become successful alumni will donate back to the school. And the way they calculate that model, that formula is, well, if they need these students to donate back to the school 5-10 years from now, they need to accept the most talented crop. And of course, there's many ways to measure talent, and grades and standardized test scores are just one of them. But those are absolutely factors that these schools look at, because in order to maintain their status as one of the top schools in the top 50, endowment and the funding that goes to support their world-class faculty is a very big consideration. And so they are forced essentially to accept the best and the brightest, the strongest students of the bunch. And so these students who have great standardized test scores to show, good grades to show, a good profile to show, I think that's particularly helpful for getting into these schools. So that's my answer for number one. And number two is a really good question that I get asked a lot as well on our program side, and it's about timing. So what I'm going to do for the parents listening is to provide a roadmap to understand where we are headed in terms of calendar year 2023 and 2024. So the first thing that I want to bring to everybody's attention is that there's a new digital SAT coming in 2024. And the reason I want to bring that up ahead of time is because it will allow you to understand whether your teen, if he or she is a sophomore, a junior, or even a freshman, it allows you to plan ahead. Because juniors, they don't need to worry about the new digital SAT in 2024. But freshmen and sophomore, they're going to face a new testing format in 2024, a format that is going to be completely different from the format today. The format today is paper oriented. The new format is going to be computer oriented. And the reason that distinguishment is important is that the computer test in 2024 is going to be adaptive. And not a lot of people have taken note of this yet, but an adaptive test means when you are taking the exam, questions that you get correct will calibrate the exam to become more difficult as the session goes on. And eventually, what's going to happen is the test will then calibrate your score based on the difficulty level of the questions that you've been working on. And then it will find a range-bound, statistically confident like SAT score that you most likely would have gotten in many different scenarios had you taken the test multiple times. And so that type of format is different from what teens are used to today. In fact, that format is very similar to the GMAT exam that folks need to take to get into, say, a top MBA program, or the GRE, which is a graduate level exam that folks take to get into a regular general graduate program. So if someone is a sophomore or a freshman, I would say that preparing early is absolutely the best strategy. And the reason is, what we have found as a coaching program for math and English is that the biggest variable that contributes to student success is duration. So what that means is, say we have a student who is trying to improve his or her grades, or on the SAT or on the ACT for that matter. What we have found is that the duration of the coaching session is going to help that person identify what is the chances that he or she will make a substantial material improvement. And obviously, someone who dedicates 6 to 9 months towards growing his or her academic foundation is usually going to have a far greater chance of raising scores, raising grades back at school than someone who just goes through, say, cram coaching for an intensive 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks. So for freshmen and sophomores, my message would be really get started as soon as you can, because the format will be very different from the one today. And then for juniors, I have a more specific answer. And the specific answer is about 12 months. And what I mean by 12 months is, I've found that the peak performance to raise an SAT score by roughly 200 to 350 points, that sweet spot of 1100 to 1400, or that 1250 to 1450, or those high 1400 levels, usually takes about 12 months. Some people achieve it sooner. Some people achieve it towards the end of the 12 months. But what I found is that 12 months usually is the sweet spot.
Larry, always insightful. I hope that was beneficial to you, parents who are listening. I completely agree with absolutely everything you stated, and especially on the length of time front. I think the standardized testing approach, where you say, what was the number one factor we saw in our most successful students, was just duration. That is identical, right, to actually my coaching philosophy as well. Those of you who are on this might know, but I do not accept high school seniors into my program. You'll find many coaches across the country who gladly will, right, take those last second essay reviews, etc. I don't. It's always sad when I have to reject high school seniors, but I do it for a reason. The number one most important factor I've seen over 12 and a half years of doing this now with over 160 families is just duration. The amount of time that a student has to prepare for the college planning journey in general. And on a microscopic level, I think the exact same thing applies to standardized testing. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Well, thank you for that, Larry, and especially the insight regarding the digital SAT. What we should absolutely plan to do is have another one of these, certainly like in a year from now, as the digital SAT is about to go live, and we can kind of go into the nitty gritty and the details. As of right now, my high school juniors who are in my program know that it doesn't apply to them, but for sophomores and freshmen, it certainly does. One more follow-up here, and then we can switch and you can ask me any question that maybe your email list might want to know about college planning. But talk to me about the ACT, because the ACT, SAT, I think everyone must know at this point, it really doesn't matter what score you submit. But I'm more wondering on the digital side, is there anything you've heard in your inner circles about the ACT maybe going digital, or no?
So I'm actually a part of the National Test Prep Association. And if our parents here look up ntpa.org,
I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, you'll see that Tigerway is one of the founding members of the National Test Prep Association. And the reason this is valuable is that as an association, we actually connect directly with the professionals at College Board to understand what type of questions are going to be coming out on the new digital SAT. And they provide us guidance, preliminary guidance on what these types of questions are designed to measure across the teenage spectrum? What kind of skills are they trying to capture in the form of objective data points in math and English? And the College Board, they are making that digital push. What we have understood so far is that we haven't seen any news flow related to the ACT going online. That might change, and we'll update you promptly if that happens. But as of now, we have not really heard any news flow related to the ACT going online. But what I can do to give your parents and our parents from both of our lists additional information is this. Some parents then might wonder, well, which exam is more important? And the answer to this question is that it's not that one test is more important than the other. Believe it or not, they both have equal weight. Jack and I have both had students go to top 30 schools in this admission cycle with either submitting an ACT or an SAT. So there's no evidence that the SAT is preferred over the ACT or vice versa. But what I do think where there is some edge to be played is this. You might have noticed that the ACT has its own subscore for science. And what that means is, well, admission officers, they're going to see an English score, a math score, and also a science score. Whereas the SAT, it's only a math score and an English score. So what that means is if you have a teen and he or she is particularly strong at reading scientific graphs and data tables, which is what the ACT science section tests, then what you can do is have potentially a higher ACT score if your ability to read scientific charts and scientific tables is naturally a strength. And therefore, your ACT score is a better reflection of your skill set than, say, the SAT, purely because of the composition of the exam. So that is one quirk between the two exams in terms of how you can use your natural strengths to put yourself in the best possible light. But in terms of admissions decisions, these two exams have equal weighting based on the admissions data that Jack and I have collected over the years. And Jack has helped lots of students get into amazing colleges. I talk to Jack probably every couple weeks, and I'm on his email list. And every time he sends out success stories about his students, I'm just thinking that's incredible. It's amazing, right? And so in the emails, he'll talk about whether his students took the ACT or the SAT. And of course they do well, but what I've seen is that they take either. So the point is, as long as you have taken the exam, you've put yourself in the best possible light, you've worked hard in high school, you put together a good profile, you maximize your chances. You just don't want to leave any stones unturned. That's the core philosophy.
I could not agree more. Well, I certainly want to leave some time here with open chat box questions. But before we do, Larry, are there any questions either you have or you think listeners from kind of your side might have of me before we open it up?
Yes. So I'm going to ask you some questions that my team has been getting a lot on the phone lately related to college planning. And so I think that you are definitely an expert in this area. The question that I wanted to ask you is, when it comes to the college essay and the supplemental essay, is there any difference in, let's say, the core importance between the Common App essay versus the supplement? In other words, are they both equally important, or is one essay secretly more important than the other?
Great question. So I'm going to give a short answer and a long answer, right? The short answer is going to be based just actually on math. There is only one essay a student will write that will, for all intents and purposes, go to almost every, if not every school that they apply to. That is the Common App personal statement. So from a statistical standpoint, if you're saying which essay in general of all of college planning is the most important, it's far and away the most. Because the supplemental essays go to one school. So if you're applying to, let's say, 15 schools, your Common App personal statement will go to, we'll say 15 of them. There's a small nuance here. If you're applying to like the UC schools in California, you have to write a different one. But for the sake of this example, it will go to 15 schools, right? So the supplements, if you're then going to apply to Boston University, you'll write those specifically for Boston University. So from a mathematical standpoint, the Common App personal statement for your entire college application process has a 15x greater weight, right? So just from mathematics, I have students in my program start with the Common App personal statement for two reasons. One, because just based on that math, it is the most important in their holistic approach, because it's going to go to every school. But two, actually the Common App personal statement, the prompts come out earlier. You have more time to write them. The supplemental essays are school specific and usually come out in the back half of junior summer into senior fall. So for those reasons, I have my students fill out the Common App personal statement and complete that first. Now, to kind of answer the second part of your question about the nuances of both, the actual essays actually should be written differently. Now, you all can see the link I put in the chat, my preferred partners. I actually have a preferred essay partner, College Essay Advisors. They're based in Manhattan. Stacy is the founder. She's incredible. You can see that they have amazing college essay resources. So a lot of what I'm actually going to explain comes from, yes, my own knowledge of 12 and a half years of doing this, but also my knowledge in the last handful where I've been CEA's preferred partner. When students are in my program, when they reached my 6-week essay writing boot camp, College Essay Advisors takes over and actually provides a lot of the foundations that I'm going to explain right now. On the college essay front, the Common App personal statement is much more about how it is written versus what is written. I'm going to say that again. The Common App personal statement, it's much more about how it is written versus what is written. Okay. The supplemental essays, on the other hand, is almost the opposite. It is much more about what is written. So to give you some examples, right? The Common App personal statement, there are 7 prompts. 7 prompts for a reason. They don't care which one you write on. And in fact, in my program, unless students have a strong affinity towards one of the first 6, I usually guide them to write on the 7th, which is just a topic of your choice. Again, there's a reason there are 7. They want to see a creative essay, one that kind of breaks norms. Gone are the days of taking a 5-paragraph middle school style essay and using it for your Common App personal statement. No way. The goal is to stand out, to write creatively, to write thoughtfully. And that can be about a slew of different items, right? The best college essay I've seen over the past, honestly, several years was written by a student last year. He wrote about the nuances of his weekly visit to the fast food restaurant Whataburger. He was a Texas kid. Whataburger was a big part of his life. I only tell that because A, it's the truth. It was probably the best college essay I've seen in years. And 2, because it was about a fast food restaurant. The actual topic, what it is about, it does not need to be about some tragedy a student has gone through. It does not need to be about their summer community service, right? It truly is much more about how a student writes. Now, if a hardship has occurred, and that hardship allows a student to write creatively from their heart, that can be acceptable, right? But I think the bigger theme here is students need to pick a topic they're actually interested in and want to write on, because that more than anything will help the creative writing come out. Now, on the supplemental essay front, right, and you can tell this to anyone who reaches out to you again, Larry, that is where it's much more about what you are writing. The classic supplemental essay is the why insert school essay. You can actually go to my preferred partners, go to College Essay Advisors right now, and you can see they have an entire tab for supplemental essays. Stacy is unbelievable and her team. I think the last I checked, they had 189 colleges, all updated to 2022 with their supplemental questions and then step-by-step directions on how best to tackle these questions. In my program, all my students, when they're answering supplementals, actually have to go through that first to get a base level understanding, because unlike the personal statement, it's much more important about what you're writing. If it's why, Boston University, I'm going to use again, since it's around your corner, what classes can you identify in their specific course catalog? BU specific. What teachers can you highlight, right? What is it about the city of Boston that you want to, why you want to go there? It's much less about, time to write creatively, et cetera. And it's much more about to just lay your cards on the table. Why be you? So I could go on and on about this, but I think I'll pause there. Does that help answer your question, Larry?
That was a really, really insightful answer. And if you have time, I'd love to ask you another question.
Yeah, please do.
And another question that I've gotten, and this is from students and not so much parents. So once they get into the supplemental essay process, you might have noticed that some schools, their supplemental questions are very general, like why BU or why Boston College, right? But certain schools, such as Tufts, you might see that their prompts, some of them are what I would describe as, edgy, right? I'll give you an example. At Tufts, one of the prompts is, you can let us know why you want to come to Tufts, but then there are prompts that you could choose where it's like, tell us about your experience with like activism or something, right? So in your opinion, do you think that students have an edge if they write about if they respond to the more edgy prompt, Jack, or should students play it safe and respond to the question that's, why Tufts, as an example, right? I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts and insights about this. And I don't know if this is something that's exclusive to your program. Obviously, this is a really niche question, and I'm sure a lot of parents would want to know the answer to this juicy question, right? But yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I've got an answer, and it relates to actually kind of just more college applications, I would say, on a general front.
Yeah.
The answer is, if the answer to the edgy question is truthful, honest, and actually deep down true to what the student represents, then they should absolutely answer that question and it will help them.
Okay.
However, and this is where I often, this kind of relates to a bigger college planning realm in general. If that's not the case, then I actually strongly encourage a student, if they're just going to say, activism, let me see, and either make something up or truly extrapolate beyond what they've typically done, or honestly beyond what they're comfortable doing, my recommendation is don't go there, right? And that really, on a kind of bigger theme here, and then I see some people have some questions. We'll certainly get into that in a second. On a bigger theme, it's really important that a student actually represent who they are, honestly, because all a college is trying to do is understand who a student is at their core. And I can tell you, when an application is either dishonest or stretches the truth too much, it's painfully obvious. One area I see this often, and I have to work with students on, is actually what I call category 4 of admissions, which is what I call your story, how you put it all together. What things are you interested in outside of school? What kind of an applicant are you? The amount of seniors in their fall of senior year with 6 weeks to go before applications are due who start just joining clubs, right? Or create a club at school. Admissions officers see right through that, right? It's very obvious you're doing this to check the box on college applications and not because it's actually genuine. So I think that's kind of the bigger theme to your answer, if that makes sense.
Amazing. Yeah, that absolutely answers it.
Fantastic. Well, what we will do here now, as it's 2:30, so we're actually right on schedule, is we're going to open it up to questions in the chat box. If you are a parent on this right now and you have a question, feel free to actually type it in the chat starting now. We'll do our best to get to all of them. If we do get to all of them and it's before 2:45 Mountain Time, then we'll let you all go. If we don't get to all of them, what we'll do at 2:45 is we'll say goodbye to whoever needs to leave, and then we'll keep going until we have all answers in the chat box that are satisfactory. So if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat now. I think especially Aaron O'Connell, because you have your hand raised, feel free to write a question in the chat if you've got it. We'll wait a minute or two to see if they start populating. And if we don't get any questions, then believe me, I've got many more for Larry.
Yeah, while the parents are coming up with their questions, I thought that response was fantastic, because I think about the situation and I'm thinking, if someone is truthful about how they portray, their story, then there's no reason not to take the edgy question. But at the same time, if it's so stretched beyond what the profile suggests, right? Like you say, yeah, I'm really all about activism, and then all the experience related to, let's say, community service was just done in senior year, then there's no evidence to really support that the student has that passion. So that's a great observation.
Thanks, Larry. All right, we've got at least one. Larry, I'm going to let you take this.
Okay, so we have a question from Kathleen asking, are schools going to stay test optional? So this is where we enter a subjective type of view on college admissions. And I largely believe that the long-term trajectory of college admissions is to consider students on a holistic basis. Now, there are some schools that require test scores, such as MIT, and schools that are very engineering oriented, very quantitatively driven. Yes, they need to see numbers in order to make their admission decisions. But even at schools such as Harvard, Princeton, Yale, I believe they will continue their test optional policies. But the key here is to please not misunderstand test optional as a way to not challenge yourself and put yourself in the best possible position for success. I want to give an example of what I mean by giving yourself challenges in the process. So one of the things that Tigerway has studied over time is that a key factor towards a person's long-term success is that person's grit. And what I mean by grit is that person's ability to deal with obstacles, setbacks, and small failures that don't necessarily jeopardize the future, of course, right? But the more situations that a person has encountered in terms of obstacles and overcome, the stronger that person becomes. And I know a lot of teenagers, and believe me, I was there when I was in high school. I had to work hard in order to get a great SAT score. It didn't come naturally to me, believe me. I believe that teenagers who at their current age, right, where they are intellectually ripe, 15 to 17 years old, if they do not give themselves an opportunity to challenge like what they can really become capable of, I do believe that later on in life, and not just in college, the moment there's a setback, the moment there's a bigger challenge, could be a life challenge, could be a career challenge, could be an academic challenge, they might not be able to handle it as well. And so this is a long-term type of opinion that I have, but I sincerely believe that folks who have the ability to go test optional should at least give themselves the chance to see what they're made of when it comes to building a strong foundation, especially since math and English are such key skills in any industry, any career that you wish to pursue. But to answer your question briefly, I think, and this is from a test preparation company's house view, I think that the test optional landscape is here to stay.
It's a great question, Kathleen. I'm going to add one more bit of kind of general college planning insight to it. It's actually a two-part answer to you, Kathleen. So you probably didn't think that your question was going to lead to a 5-minute answer here, but I do think it's important, and it actually gets to the crux of kind of where college planning is going. First part to your answer. I also agree with Larry based on what I see. I think test optional is here to stay for the most part. There will be the MITs of the world who have already gone back to test mandatory and are going to stay that way. Absolutely. You'll see in some of the most STEM heavy schools that be the case. But for the most part, I think test optional is here to stay. With that said, from a college coach perspective, this is what I'm telling all of my families, and I want you to hear this, Kathleen, especially, and anyone else who's on this call. I teach my students and parents of my students to act as if standardized testing is mandatory until minimum senior fall, meaning until, let's call it October of senior year. Act as if it is mandatory. The reason being, for the most part, really, I think in the top minimum 50, if not even 100 schools in the country these days, even if they say they're test mandatory, if you get a good score, it is still, in my opinion, the second most important characteristic in all of college admissions. That is just hands down my belief. And I think if you ask any of the colleges, they would say the same thing. The only thing that trumps it is obviously high school grades and the rigor of classes you take. For that reason, it's a massive piece of a student's portfolio. And if you're just going to say, oh, well, it's test optional, so I'm just going to eliminate it, you are doing your child a disservice. Now, come senior fall, in October of senior year, if your student does not have a test score that they're proud of, then you can have a conversation about, do we want to eliminate that massive chunk of a portfolio? And just know, guess what that means? That means that all the other aspects of their application have a magnifying glass on them because there's just less items in the denominator, if you will, to judge an applicant on. Last thing I'll say on that front, if you're saying, well, Jack, what is a good score or a score they're proud of? You can use a resource like collegesimply.com. There are also many others there, so I'm not going to put it in the chat. You can just look up SAT, ACT conglomerates from schools and see their data, and it will give you the middle 50% zone for students who are accepted to the school. It's only been around a few years, this whole test optional notion, but what I have guided my students on is minimum you're looking to hit the 25% mark. Okay. So if you can look at the school and use a resource like College Simply, and if your child does not reach that 25% mark, do not submit it. Submitting it actually probably will hurt you. If your child is over the 50% mark, absolutely submit the score. It will likely help you. And if you're somewhere in the 25 to 50% mark, to be honest, it's not really going to matter either way. That's where it's a student to student call, and you can put in factors like, what are they trying to do? Is their math subsection higher and they're trying to be a math? Maybe it's a yes. That's where it really becomes kind of a coaching play. So I hope that kind of helps give some guidance there. One more aspect, and then we'll get back to the questions in here. Larry brought up rejection. Yesterday was December 15th. For those who don't have seniors, you might not know, but that is typically early decision day. That's when a lot of students hear yes or no on their early decision school, which is their top choice. And if they get in, they're going. I had some acceptances yesterday. That was fantastic. I also had some rejections yesterday. Some of my most elite students were rejected. I had a student rejected from NYU yesterday. I had a student rejected from Princeton yesterday. I bring this up because I think rejection is actually really important for students to experience. Sure, in my opinion as a coach, would I have loved for my student to get into NYU and Princeton? Absolutely. But also there's a part of teaching students to try to strive and reach for goals that might be slightly above where they are. And, in the case of the NYU and Princeton student, I mean, almost any student in the country, those are reach schools, meaning you're more likely to get rejected than accepted. So they were aware. But I bring this all together to say, in some instances, right, striving for those goals and actually experience the occasional rejection, like in your case, Larry, maybe not getting the best SAT score the first time you take it. It's actually a really powerful lesson for teenagers. So in my program, I actually spend a lot of time teaching them how to mentally deal with rejection, because I'm not one of those college coaches that says you're going to apply early decision and everyone's getting in. It's not how it works, right? Even my best students will sometimes get rejected. So I think just in general, that's a really important part.
Yeah, I think what Jack and I largely are doing as a mission to the students and families that we serve, and this is important, is we wish to create strong people. And what I mean by that is, as the challenges for people get more intense, vying for competitive internships, vying for competitive jobs, it requires a very strong mind in order to withstand the variance of outcomes that people can face later on, just a couple of years after they finish high school. So our mission, embedded inside Jack's college coaching program and my SAT program, is we aim to create stronger people. And it is that mission that has helped us create a brand where a lot of families have really seen Jack and my program as a trusted resource to help them, to help teens for not only academic foundational building, but also character development. That's more and more important going forward, in our opinion.
Speaking of character development, we've got actually one kind of in that realm here. JA says, how important is community service to an application? Do you need to be part of an organization that gives credit, i.e. 100 hours to get presidential award designation, or is it acceptable to volunteer where you want and not have quantifiable numbers or awards? Great question. We'll do our best to maybe be a little bit more concise here. For those that do have to hop in 1 minute here, we will send out the recording after. For those that can stay to the top of the hour, we're happy to be on until 3 p.m. Mountain Time, 5 p.m. Eastern. So, JA, answer to your question is this falls into, first of all, I want everyone to understand where this question falls into. College planning shouldn't be thought of as just like a spray and pray approach. It really is actually pretty organized. There are 4 main categories to college admission that every admissions representative will judge a student on. Number 1, high school grades and the rigor of classes you take. Number 2, your standardized test score. Again, we just had a lengthy discussion how that could be eliminated, but for the most part, you should attempt to do well in category 2. Number 3 is your essays, college essay, the Common App personal statement, or supplementals. And then number 4 is what I call your story. How do you wrap this all together? And that, JA, is what you are talking about here. Community service can be a component to a student's story. Now, what I'm going to say to you here is there are students every year that get into Harvard with 0 hours of community service. Okay. Now, some high schools, just so you know, you actually need to do a minimum to graduate. But my bigger point is when you say, how important is it or is it mandatory? There are students who get into Harvard every year without doing community service. So is it mandatory? No. On the bigger theme, what this falls into is what I call it is how you tell your story. Meaning, if your child is trying to paint the picture of the fact that they are a giver, they support others, they are a helper, and that is coming across in their entire application, my answer to you would be, it might be really important to have something like community service that shows that this isn't all made up, that it actually is their true story, right? Going back to that theme of, is it genuine? Now, on the actual, like, is the designation important? Again, gray area here. If you were to say, okay, option A, they have 100 hours, so they get the designation of presidential award. Option B, they don't. Of course, I'm going to go with option A. However, again, just because they have 99 hours and don't get it, am I going to say that that's a game changer to their application? No, right? You can describe that you did 99 hours. Having the designation of, presidential, sure, it's nice, but it's like the cherry on top here, right? You can then put it in the Common App as your honors and awards. So again, like a lot of these questions, there is a gray area. It depends the type of story your child is trying to tell, and that will funnel down into how important this is. But in general, I think for you, JA, to take back to your child, just know it's how you tell your story, right? A lot of students think, oh, I need to be able to have this exact award designation in order for it to be impressive. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it off entirely. No, if your child ends up with 99 hours, please make sure they tell their story that they have 99 hours. Just because they were 1 hour short and didn't get that designation isn't the worst case. But guess what? It is bad if they don't explain it, right? And that's where I think a lot of students don't realize that actually, if they just tell their story a little bit more proactively, then really you have a lot more leeway. I hope that makes sense. We've got another one here, Larry, and this one is definitely for you. So I'm gonna let you take it.
Okay, thank you. So this question is from Chris, and he's asking, he's confused on the timing for the digital SAT. Well, when will it be available for practice? Should he practice and take the current format for a baseline? So right now, 10th graders, sophomores, they're in a little bit of a gray area because official questions for the digital SAT hasn't really come out in volume yet, but it will later next year. So the way to get ready for the digital SAT is to have a strong foundation on the current format. And here's why I say this. The truth of the matter is, while the format is going to change and there are a lot of quirks around the adaptive testing format, if someone is fundamentally strong at math, fundamentally strong at reading comprehension, good at revising grammar, those skill sets are highly transferable. So I want you to think about preparing for the new format, using the current format as a very solid strategy because it's a transferable skill. I'll give you an example. So in corporate, most people use Microsoft Excel. But there's an alternative to Microsoft Excel, and that's Google Sheets. So if someone knows how to use Microsoft Excel, the transition to use Google Sheets won't be that hard. And so it's the same concept. It's that thing, it's that like that logical thinking of how do I write these really complex formulas, these macros on Excel. And being able to do that on Google Sheets is just, it's just a matter of like where you do it. It's the same thing for the SAT, current format versus new format. There's a little bit of an adjustment in terms of the testing experience, but the bulk of the focus should be build a strong foundation in math, know how to evaluate how shapes evolve on a coordinate grid if we're talking about geometry here, right? Know how to write well, know exactly when punctuation should be used in what instance. And that core skill set is going to be applied to whatever the SAT evolves to into the future. So I hope that helps.
I love it, Larry. And I've got a quick follow-up here, and this is fun, everyone. I don't know the answer to this. Larry, is there, in terms of timing, when the new SAT is getting released, is there going to be any overlap where a child will truly be able to check a box and say, I want to take the old format, I want to take the new format? Or is it like one day it's just gonna, new format is the only thing available?
So Jack asked a really good question. And basically he says, is there a grace period, right? Is there a grace period where people can take the current format in case they're not ready to just switch over to adaptive? And based on our conversations, the NTPA, the National Test Prep Association and College Board, it's gonna change.
Okay.
In 2024. So it's gonna change like this, and at least for now, and policies can always change, but as of this moment, as of this webinar, right, there's no grace period.
Okay. And do we know the exact date? Is there a date in time yet selected for that change date?
The first test in 2024.
Okay. Got it. So there you go. So that'll be January 2024.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So we are 13 months away from the SAT going all adaptive. So, just to add one more option to, Chris's question here, hypothetically, Chris, right? If you wanted in your, let's say your 10th grader, all right, has until 11th grade, has 13 months, well, 12 months, let's call it. If they got really good at the old format, let's call it like the current format of the SAT, they could in the next 12 months just do well, solidify their score and be done.
Yeah.
Just to add that. Now, Chris, again, talk to Larry, right? It's all about time. And do you really want your 10th grader cramming in this SAT in the next, year and not giving that buffer? Probably not. But my only point is, right, if you're like, oh, my child is doing really well in the old format, I want them to just be done with this. Then hypothetically, if you have a 10th grader, have them just know that by December 2023, they basically have to have their score finalized, which, yes, is early for high schoolers to do that, but that is hypothetically an option. Am I right, Larry?
It's doable. It's very doable. In fact, if I look into program statistics, roughly 1/3 of our students enrolled at Tigerway are sophomores, and the remaining are juniors, and a small sliver are freshmen. Just like Jack, we also don't have the ability to help seniors, given that the shortest duration coaching format that we have is 3 months. And if someone joins us in senior year, we most likely don't have enough time to help them get a meaningful impact. Because our focus at Tigerway is, if you're going to have us help you, at the minimum, we would want scores to go up at least 70 to 100 points if you're going for the shortest duration, 3 months. But if you're looking at, let's say, 6 months or 12 months, which is timeframes that we generally recommend, we go for the big jumps in our program. We go for the 150 to 250, 300 point jumps, because that's the difference between like making a big impact on the application. And I'm sure Jack would agree, like if you have an A- or an A in a class, it doesn't really make a difference. But if you have a B versus an A, oh, that makes a big difference, because that's completely a different tier. So if you're looking for, I would say, big jumps, then yes, you have to commit to the duration.
This leads right into Kristen has a great question here. What is the best way to prepare for the SAT? Buy a book, a practice test, take a test prep class. Obviously, I'm going to lead this into you, Larry, but I'm going to add one brief bit of kind of overarching insight. My job is to basically provide students with the framework to assess this exact question. In my program, when students reach junior fall, at the latest, we have a discussion about what were your baseline scores on SAT and ACT, and that usually happens early in junior fall, so we can figure out which test are you even going for. Now, in your case, Christian, because you say the SAT, I'm just going to assume for the sake of this question, you and your high schooler are all in on the SAT. If they're not, I might just say, take a step back and actually have your high schooler take one practice test of each or one live test of each to figure out which is preferred. The worst thing that I ever would, want to see you go through is to have you dive into the SAT simply because you're located on one of the coasts of the country and it's just SAT biased. 90 to 95% of my students have a strong affinity towards one test or the other. And like Larry mentioned earlier, it does not matter which you submit. So that's basically step one, is actually figure out if it's the SAT. If it is, then here's my next insight. There are basically 3 potential tiers of studying, and it varies student to student. I'll tell you, my students are pretty even across the board. It's like 33%, 33%, 33%. Option 1, the cheapest option, and I would say the most variability, and that is self-study. Okay. Like any student, and by the way, this is what I did as a high schooler, and I felt like I was pretty motivated as a high schooler, and even then, sometimes I struggled, but self-study, right? Your high schooler then has to have discipline. Your high schooler has to actually have a proper study method. If the student is going that way, I recommend breaking it up into chunks. The pros, obviously, it's the least expensive option. The cons are it requires a very motivated high schooler to do well. But guess what? I have seen it work. The second is, I would say, more online group style classes, which Larry can certainly talk to. That's kind of the middle pricing tier. And then the third is actually the person who comes to your door, sits at your kitchen table, and works with your child weekly for however much time. So that's just kind of, I want to paint those 3 buckets because those are the 3 that all my families choose between. And it really does vary family to family. Now that I've said that, Larry, maybe you can dive in and offer any more insight you have here to answer Kristen's question.
Yes, so I would totally agree with what Jack said. Self-study, group class, online or in person, or one-on-one, online or in person. So those 3 are the categories that teens are going to go through. And I'm going to give you some statistics on effectiveness, duration, based on observational data that we've seen. And I'm going to make it as objective as possible. My background is I own a test preparation company, but I'm going to give you as objective of the data as possible. If your teenager is highly motivated, if he or she has the ability to do lots of planning on his or her own, then self-study has significant value because it allows the teenager to really kind of be like a consultant, right? Treat it like a problem and then solve it. And that experience on its own is going to be very valuable for them going forward, for any kind of problem that they solve in the future. If the teenager is highly motivated, very thoughtful with planning, but doesn't know what to focus on, and that's the key, right? That's the information that's lacking from the situation. Like, you're motivated, you want to do well, but you don't know where to focus. That's the situation when I do think that group coaching or one-on-one coaching will help. So a lot of students, I've seen them be very successful with self-study, but there are also students that find a lot of success when they get external help. And there's nothing wrong with getting external help. So it's just a matter of preference, to be honest, right? And it's just a matter of how much time do you want to leave to variance? Because inevitably, when you spend the time to figure it out on your own, you have to come up with all the questions, and then you need to come up with all the answers. Whereas when you get external help, your learning curve gets shortcutted. And so it really depends, like, what is the preferred way of doing things. And I'm really here to say that you can find success in any way that you choose, as long as you have a plan and you're committed to it. So that's my thoughts on self-studying. And I think it's a great approach for students who are highly motivated and they love tackling challenges on their own. The second format, and I'm just going to group this as external help, okay, whether it's group or it's one-on-one, is if your teenager is very motivated, intelligent, ready to succeed, but if your teen had access to information on what to study, where to focus, how to plan, because it's the how question that's important, then I have seen for sure that the growth curve gets shortcutted in terms of time, and securing the outcome becomes a higher probability event. In other words, if you self-study, it can absolutely work, but two things are uncertain: how long, and will I truly get there? If there's a student who's highly motivated, right, and is ready to go, then external help can increase the probability of getting to that threshold, that goal, as long as it's realistic, of course, and shorten the time. And what I have to say is that external help won't help students who are not motivated. So that might seem strange, right? That might seem strange. Like, well, I thought external help would help students who, take it from a D to an A, right? Or go from like a 900 on the SAT to, like a 1500, right? Actually, those cases are very rare. And so coaching, a coaching program, our business model is actually created around the cycle of taking good students to even better students, or making excellent students into A-class students, top tier students. It's very tough to take someone who's at, let's say, an F and turn it into an A. We have a lot of data on this. We've been in a lot of those scenarios, right? Those scenarios are it's just really tough. One metaphor for everybody here. Let's say we want to think about a business and take it to the next level. Well, what's the easiest kind of business to take to the next level? One that's already healthy, one that already has a structure, one that already is primed for success, just one that needs a little bit of guidance, if that makes sense. But if, there's a business that is unstructured, management is just unprepared, they're just not motivated, the product is, frankly, let's say, terrible, well, there's nothing you can really do to that business, right? Same thing here in this process. So external help can definitely help and accelerate the goal, but it is designed to maximize its benefit for a certain type of student.
Could not agree more, Larry. All right, we've got, it looks like one more, unless anyone else types in the chat. Thank you all who have been here. If this is the last question, then I wish you all well on your holiday ventures, whatever they are. We've got, and if any of you do have another question, you can at least post in the chat, but right now is the last one. We've got Denise, from your experience with most colleges and universities in the USA, do either of you have an opinion on how schools overall believe what the most rigor is, i.e. IB program, Cambridge, or AP? Can you rank in order? Is this more school specific? Like a lot of these questions, I'll start out here because this is a little more college planning in general, but Larry, chime in after if you have any other thoughts. Here is what I'm going to say on this front is, to be honest, this question is almost irrelevant. It's a really good question, but here's why I'm going to say it's almost irrelevant. I don't think any parent or family should base their like where they're going to move around which of these style programs do they have, right? Like taking your kid sophomore year, picking them up and moving them somewhere else because you heard that another program is like slightly better is honestly, in my opinion, misguided. Here is a little bit more background, right? Colleges always ask for, they say, we want to see high schoolers who get the best grades in the highest level classes. So Denise, this is a really thoughtful question because you're saying which of these is the most highest ranked? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. Most schools, unless you can highlight one that I don't know of, only have one of these tiers, right? Like my high school, the highest level was AP. There was no IB offering. Schools then offer an IB program, right? There's no AP. To add to this, you list IB, Cambridge, AP, right? There are schools that actually don't have any of those distinctions and they just call it the highest is honors. Now we're seeing more and more schools that actually the highest is what's called like dual credit, which goes through like gives you college credit as well. So I only bring this up because here's what colleges will do. When your child applies to college, there is what is called a school report. It is typically a 2-page document that comes with every high school. Again, from the Boston area, my high school was Concord Carlisle High School. When I applied to Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt saw in my application the 2-page report on Concord Carlisle High School. That report stated that the highest level offered was AP. So when you're a Vanderbilt admissions rep reviewing my application in 2010, they saw, okay, the highest level is AP. What has Jack taken? They weren't saying, oh, the highest level is AP. I wonder why he hasn't taken an IB, curriculum. It's like very obvious because he went to Concord Carlisle High School that wasn't offered. So that's why I'm only saying the question might be irrelevant is the goal for your child should be to strive for the highest level available. Colleges will not knock you if it simply wasn't available. So that's kind of my thought on that. The goal is whatever is available, strive for the best, but I wouldn't, change your entire lifestyle to try to go to a program that's an IB versus an AP. It really is much more internal what's available at your high school, if that makes sense. So short answer, I actually can't rank them. So I'm sorry about that. Unless Larry, otherwise, that's kind of my thoughts.
I would echo what Jack had to say. The only thing that I would potentially add is if you personally have a concern that the curriculum at your teen's high school is not strong enough, or you don't think that your teen's high school is competitive, then you have to demonstrate it with a strong SAT score.
Absolutely. Right. And that comes back to you do the best with what you're given. And the goal is to obviously maximize each tier, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, like I talked about, grades, SAT or ACT, college essay, and then eventually your story. And so, yeah, if you think, right, let's just say there are schools out there in the country who don't offer any of the ones that you said, Denise. So you're not necessarily going to get knocked for if your child goes to a school that doesn't offer any of the programs you offer, and the highest level is, a regular style class. But at that point, that's when you have to say, the highest level my child's high school offers is just lower than the vast majority of the country. We need to make sure that the other aspects of the application are elite. That makes sense. Oh, I see what you're saying. We're going to high school and have all those options locally available. I'm sorry, Denise, I don't have a prioritization. I really don't. They're all elite. I don't know of in my college planning circles any college admissions rep that would say this is actually superior to the other. So probably my recommendation would be base your choice off of other factors. Unless, again, otherwise, Larry.
I would agree. I would say rather than look at the school curriculum, look at the alumni of those high school students and where they go to college. I think that's a better indicator.
Great idea.
So for example, like you want to go to X high school or Y high school or Z high school, right? X offers AP, Y offers IB, Z offers Cambridge. What you can do is you can look into how many students does this high school send to, say, Harvard or Yale or Princeton, right? And that's a far stronger indicator than what the curriculum is offered at these high schools. So look at the end result and then reverse engineer the data points from that.
And one more thought there, Denise, if you're saying, well, how do I get that data? Typically, if you as a prospective parent are interested in the schools, I don't know if you could probably do this over the phone. You might actually have to go in person, but most of these schools just have that data readily available, either just in their own report or in what would be called a Naviance scattergram chart. Most high schools that have Naviance, or these days it's called SCORE, keep track of the last 10 years worth of data on their high school, and it can actually chart students and where they ended up in school. So whether it's Naviance SCORE, just an internal report, my guess is if you actually like called, they probably wouldn't give it to you. But if you show up in person and say that you're a prospective parent, my guess is they'll probably provide that information pretty quickly.
Yeah. So I would say I think you would get that information from the guidance office.
Yes.
That's where you would get the information. So talk to the guidance office.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I see no more in the chat. Thank you all who are joined today. Wish you all a happy holiday season. If you enjoyed this, let us know either in the chat or shoot us a quick note via email. This obviously does take our time. We are more than happy to do it. We love doing it. But if you say, hey, Jack and Larry, you did this incorrectly, or there's a better format you could do, let us know. Or if you actually just really enjoyed this, let us know as well. It would mean a lot. Again, I am Jack. This is Larry. And I don't think I have anything else.
Yep, and I just wanted to say the best way to reach me is to join our email list at tigerway.substack.com. So I'm just going to put that into the chat. And the reason the email list is actually a URL is because my email list is public. And so my program officer sends out weekly emails, and you can actually see the emails that we've sent out in the past. You can actually see the one that we sent out a couple of days ago. It's all public, made public for all. So feel free to join the email list. And once I get the recording from Jack, I'll also put it onto my email list. So if you don't get it from him for whatever reason, you'll also see it from my email list as well. And for those of my parents who are coming to this webinar from my list, make sure to join Jack's email list and take down his contact information, Jack at delaheconsulting.com. He's very, very good at college planning.
Well, thank you, Larry. And you're very, very good at standardized test prep. So we appreciate it. I put the link in the chat to my blog as well. And if you go there, you can see all of the past blogs that I send out. That actually is exactly the same thing that you do, Larry, just slightly differently. Every newsletter I send out, I post publicly on my blog, so you can see them all there for the past many years. And if you go there, there's also will be a button that you can subscribe to my upcoming newsletter. Additionally, here's our emails if you want to write to us personally. All right. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.